Good evening and happy Sunday, everybody. We are back from our summer break, and I am back in North Dakota. I wasn't particularly expecting to have a summer break, but I had two busy weekends in a row. So this was how it just had to go. I was not really able to make it, but we are back and we are back at it. So I think there's a really important distinction that we need to keep in our minds if we're going to navigate this world well. That's the distinction between something that always works and the only thing that works. Got to keep the distinction between something that always works and the only thing that works very, very clear because they're two very different things. You look at something that always works. Are you thirsty? Go drink regular plain water or something that's close enough to water and contains a lot of water. That will take care of that problem. It's very simple. It always works. You'll notice that all of those things that we need to survive and we need to work together, um, things like that, they tend to work very consistently. They tend to work always. We have a lot of things in this world that don't always work. It's a lot of things in this world that are the only thing that work. You could take going to the moon, for example. How do we get to the moon? Well, the only way we've been able to get to the moon so far is to build a massive multi stage rocket. And because of various laws of physics and the Earth's gravity, you have to have 14 times your weight in fuel in order to get out of Earth's orbit and reach escape velocity and land on the moon. You may say to yourself, well, boy, that sounds kind of hard. Isn't there an easier way to get to the moon? And the answer is no. That is the only thing that works. If and when we come up with an easier way to get to the moon, everybody will do it that way. Because these massive multi stage rockets are very expensive, very dangerous, and they don't always work. Why do people bother with them then? Because they're the only thing that works. It is the only way we currently know how to make things get to the moon. Now, for most of us, we're not rocket scientists. We are not directly concerned with the moon, except insofar as we see it in the sky. But there is something that I think touches us all, and one of the most common places that we get this category air, I think that's marriage. I think a lot of people are approaching marriage as if it's one of those things that always works. That if you get married, then your marriage will work out perfectly. That you that it just works, and you don't really have to put that much effort into it. Very easy thing to do, especially if you're somewhat young and naive, which is unfortunately also the best circumstances to get married under, with some caveats around that. But here's the thing: as a society, we need to have a common way of doing things. People need something to do and a path to walk on. We need to have something that we hold up as the thing that most of you should be doing. And the only thing that works for that, the only thing that can possibly fill that in society is marriage. And by marriage, I mean the church's definition of the marriage: one man, one woman, open to life, all of that other doctrine stuff you can ask me about if you're interested. That is the only thing we can hold up as this is kind of your standard path. If you don't know what else to do, or you're just wondering what you should be doing, go do that. Go see if you could get married. That's what most people should be doing. And we're not saying that because it's something that always works. Marriage has never been something that's always works. In the ancient world, most societies permitted divorce under one circumstance or another. Even in the law of Moses, you can find possibilities for divorce. It wouldn't have had these laws throughout most of human history in most places if marriage was something that always works. But they understood the necessity of it. They said this is the only thing that works. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions. I'm an exception. I'm a celibate Catholic priest. I have made a solemn promise in front of God and all of my family and friends that I was going to be a celibate Catholic priest. The way that occurred to me in my discernment of the priesthood was taking me off my natural trajectory towards marriage. I didn't go to the seminary because I was repelled by women, that I was disgusted at the thought of having children. Well, I went to seminary because I thought perhaps God is calling me to this thing, and I need to discern that. I need to sort that out. Especially early on, God kind of had to talk me into it. I didn't really want to do this until I began to understand what exactly it was that God was calling me to. But that came as an exception. I understood myself as being an exception to that. I did not think, I understood that I wasn't following the ordinary course of action. But I still had myself on that regular trajectory towards marriage, towards family life. I think that'll sort out a lot of our thinking, sort out a lot of our misunderstandings around marriage, if we understand that it's like kind of the only option. It's the only way to make things work, is to have people pair up, hopefully, have children, raise them themselves. That's what works for the individuals. That's what works for societies. That is what works for everyone. So keeping those two categories clearly distinct. Those things that always work and the only thing that works. Keep those categories clear and distinct. That will save us from a few problems. And now we're welcoming to the stage Valerie. Hello, Valerie.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing all right. I really enjoyed your little your thoughts. It's a very good distinction. I think I saw you post about it, and I was like, "That's a really good thought." And you elaborated more in depth on it. It was cool.
All righty.
So it was, you know, um, I don't know. I have anything, marvelous to add to that, but I enjoyed it. So thank you for sharing.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope everybody else out there enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Um, what are you up to these days?
We are in the final stages of the Write of the Meaning book. We're going. I got the proof copy,
Okay.
so it's a physical real book. All these flags are like possible typos and things that I have to type up for Jordan and Emily, and
Mm-hmm.
then they will fix it. So we have to get the changes in by the 25th, and then the print and ebook will be available on the 31st of this month. So after 2 years of working on this project, it's coming together. It's kind of cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
It looks like we've got a potential new friend here.
Oh, cool.
Hello, Xavier.
Hi.
Greetings.
Hello. Now, Valerie, you said it's an anthology, right?
Yes.
So, is there anybody that we would be familiar with that has contributed to this book?
Yes. John Van Donk.
Okay.
He wrote a piece whether estuary was a way to overcome cancel culture.
Estuary as a way to Okay, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't want you to like sell or give the book away here, but
Oh no, it's okay. It's in the book description. So let me see if I can get it for you real quick. Um, eh, I'm almost there. Estuary. Is it a true antidote to cancel culture?
estuary, is it a true antidote to cancel culture?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
And then we
yeah,
all.
it's just the cancel culture is always a really tricky thing to handle
Oh yeah.
because you can't possibly have like a coherent group of people, coherent community that doesn't have boundaries whatsoever. Right. And so, like, I'm Catholic. I hear all about the Spanish Inquisition all the time. I
Mhm.
hear all about the magisterium and who should be excommunicating who and what's, heresies are nowadays. And that's part of it. So I guess I'd need to read the book if I really wanted to see if I could get the answer to this question. But yeah, navigating like where exactly the boundaries should be and what happens when somebody transgresses them in something like estuary seems pretty complicated to me because it doesn't have much doctrinal content to it. It's basically just a way of talking to people. So,
Right. It's so I think Paul and John Van Dyke talk about how there's a difference between church,
hmm
which is a walled garden,
hmm
and estuary, which is basically um, a fertile ecosystem of salt water and fresh water mixing
hmm
together to create a very biodiverse environment.
hmm
And so you kind of need both. You can't just, still water is stagnant and it's not good for you. So, you kind of need moving water and you also need clean, safe drinking water.
understood. And
Yeah,
certainly different places should have different boundaries, right?
right.
So I don't think that, like I should have a lot of boundaries on me when I'm preaching at church
Mm,
because I'm doing something very specific. I need to stay not only within the bounds of Catholic theology, but like within the bounds of what's appropriate to do under these circumstances.
yeah.
And if I were to get on the wrong way of that, I should be disciplined by the bishop, right?
Mhm,
Um, and then different places and different circumstances, different organizations should have different boundaries there.
mhm,
um, so obviously I don't think that the same sort of um, restrictions, constraints that are on me when I'm preaching should be what everybody does when they're sitting down at the bar and talking to each other.
right,
That obviously should be a much freer place. So
right.
the real question is what point does the speech in a bar start to become enforceable? I would say most bar owners would be like, you could say whatever you want unless you're starting a fight,
Right.
right? And that'd be like the kind of boundaries you need there. It's like you guys can argue, you guys could even yell a little bit, but once this starts getting towards fighting words and moving towards violence, then I'm going to stop it because
Right.
unless it's the sort of bar that encourages fighting, which
Yeah.
not the
I've
sort of
never
place I
really
want
been
to
to
go.
bars, so I don't really know.
Yeah. I usually tend to stay at the more civilized places, let's say,
Yeah.
because the constraints, right?
Yeah.
Um, so the question is if you've got like a specific group of people that just want to explore ideas, want to have honest conversations with each other, who gets to pick when somebody's transgressed? I guess it would have to be the estuary leader.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I've never been part of the estuary. I like it because it facilitates meaningful conversations with deep bonds. And it's not about trying to get somebody to think what you think. It's trying to understand each other. And um but we all want to get somebody else to think what we think.
Right.
Um so according to John Van Donk and all the videos that he's done with Paul Vanderklay, and also Emily is in the who is our graphic artist.
Mm-hmm.
She came outside of a little corner of the internet. She's totally outside of that,
Mm-hmm.
and she and her friend were doing conversations like estuary, and they were doing a lot of prep work, researching stuff, and then they would talk about it together, and
Mm-hmm.
they talk about hard and difficult things
Mm-hmm.
with other people in their church choir thing, and so this was like a more freer, less homework kind of thing of having real deep conversations and exploring these things together with a mixed group of people. Um, so there's good and bad to estuary. You know, one of the positives is you hear stuff in chat and you have like an opponent processing thing going on. It's like realizing where your weak, vulnerable spots in your, you know, in your worldviews are. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I didn't not think of that at all.
Without turning each other into opponents that are trying to destroy each other.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so having honest dialogue, as John Vervaeke likes to say, dialogos, what I usually use the term good faith conversations
Mm-hmm.
to have like, and I have that with my friends. They're mostly liberals and moderates, and I'm like the one kind of conservative, libertarian leaning person in the group.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it'll get a little contentious and the things will be bubbling, but because we've been friends for like 13 to 15 years, depending on who I've been friends with, um, there's a deep amount of love and respect for each other. And that's what the estuary is supposed to kind of have, that love of thy neighbor aspect to it. Um, so we don't see each other and punch each other in the face.
No, I mean, I think.
It-
I mean, these are just my predictions, right? And
yeah.
I've got my predictions a minute. So you talk about with your friends,
Hmm.
you're sometimes able to really, dig in on a disagreement, and that
Hmm.
doesn't nuke the friendship, right?
Yeah.
Because you have something rather robust in common already.
Hmm.
Um, Aristotle would say that the highest form of friendship is the pursuit of virtue. So, hopefully, you're not at least making each other worse. You have that thing that's in common that can
Hmm.
hold the conflict within something bigger than itself.
Hmm.
Because if all you have is conflict, then you're just going to fight and try and destroy each other or go
Yeah.
away right away.
Yeah.
Um, the only circumstances in which I can see an estuary group running long term and let's say making people better and not worse is if the person who's running it
Hmm.
has a very good way of filtering out any bad actors.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
so it seems like the estuary leader is really going to be key in making this whole estuary process work.
Yeah.
Because without that, um, somebody who is, let's say, a little more forceful or a little cleverer, uh, they could actually just weasel their way into an estuary group, and like one person can destroy something like this
Yeah.
if it doesn't have a bigger structure there.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that Dr. Van Donk would think of estuary first as a way of avoiding cancel culture, because cancel culture is like the other side of that,
Yeah. He
where
says, I said avoid. He calls it antidote.
antidote to
Yeah.
cancel culture.
So
Yeah,
I apologize. It's my misspeak.
sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, because cancel culture is kind of the other side of that, where somebody, there's a group of people of various sizes, somebody's speaking something that's transgressing some kind of a boundary, and
Hmm.
that person's not allowed to uh, speak, and they get socially ostracized, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's a very natural sort of thing. It
Hmm.
and like sometimes it's a good thing, right? Because
Yeah.
like somebody
Oh
could
yeah.
be really really obnoxious and destroying something, And it can also be weaponized against an individual in order to,
Yeah.
protect some other interest.
Right.
So,
I think there's a delicate balance, like you're saying, is between truth and relationships.
mhm,
So, trying to figure out, like, what about, like the whole thing of like Peterson likes to talk about is like, you know, and other people too, other great thinkers talk about the fence.
mhm.
You don't want to remove the fence till you actually know why the fence is there.
Check. Yeah.
Like, so there's a lot of stuff I disagree with, you know, that, my natural inclination would be to reject the what's being said or done, and or what's, the person themselves, because they are personifying this thing that against my what I perceive as good and true and beautiful.
Mhm,
um and so I kind of understand and can sympathize with that. um and then it becomes like, who has the right to say, it's like, um so it's like, one of the things is I really respect you and Mark about is that you speak the truth as best as you understand it,
mhm,
and you stick to your guns. And I'm like, that's awesome.
mhm,
That we need more of that. Um, and then there's the other part of me is, because I'm like very high in agreeableness in the 5 personality trait things.
mhm,
Um, I'm very relationship oriented,
mhm. The
for good and for ill.
conflict is
Yeah.
not something that you easily can enter into, probably.
No, I don't like it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I don't, I was like, I try to minimalize it and be diplomatic. A soft word diffuses wrath, whatever that verse is.
Mhm,
Um, but also, it's like one of the things I love to talk about, and I don't really get a chance to, is the power of words for good and for ill.
mhm,
You know, um, those who s- basically about the power of words, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Um, and you know, it's like I look at myself and I think, okay, good thing about being diplomatic, I can get along with most people, providing it, outlying issues. Um, and then the other bad side is I can always aim for false peace over, dealing with a conflict that actually leads to truth and goodness.
it's a perennial temptation for you.
Yeah. So I'm like always,
You're starting to get into the reason why we invented lawyers. I was talking with a young gentleman who's having a conflict with his employer right now, and
Mm,
he really believes in the work he's doing, and he really wants to make this work with his employer. The employer is on several points really not fulfilling their end of the bargain and need to be called to task. Right?
mm,
This is a gentleman. He's not like a melting heart, but because he's so passionate about the work he's doing, and you know and like he really wants to make this work, he's not actually going to be his best representative
mm,
because of how badly he wants to make this work, especially because, at least from the part of the story that I heard, he's got some very righteous complaints about his employer right now.
mm,
And so having somebody else who could just be like, I mean, I'm just going to represent your side of the case, and I'm not going to worry about how much you enjoy the job because that's your job, not mine.
mhm,
That's actually a really useful thing. Um,
mm.
and then there are some people who have no trouble whatsoever representing themselves,
Yeah.
right? Because they're
Yeah.
just like aggressive and they want to have their place in the world.
Right.
So, the thing that's useful about these temperaments is they give you an idea of what you should be doing, right? Going into a high conflict environment would not be a good idea for you, Valerie,
No.
because you would just be anxious and nervous all the time.
Yeah, I
And
can deal with conflict. I don't want to deal with violence. That's not, I'm not really equipped for that.
sure,
I'm
and
not. I'm like, I won't shy away from it, but it's like I know how weak and vulnerable I really am, and I have my vision and my hearing loss, and
mhm.
so it's a mess.
Well,
But
just
Valerie
because
could use some assertiveness training.
I'm sorry.
So assertiveness training. Psychologists have
Oh,
training in assertiveness, where you can try to approach and propose your own will in situations through being assertive,
mm,
um, to reduce conflict, but still assert yourself and your own needs and boundaries.
yeah. There's a
It's
guy
essential to
who
well-being.
there's a guy in the self-defense world who teaches the art of de-escalation.
Hmm.
It's not. I think his name is Mark McYoung. You can find him on Google or something, and he has a whole treasure trove of information of like being assertive and being firm in your stance. It works better for guys than it does girls, especially when things can explode violently. Um, but de-escalating the situation as best as one can.
Hmm.
Um, and but yeah, you're totally right. I mean, I have one friend who's very agreeable, more agreeable than I am, and it's kind of a challenge to stand up for oneself and just be one's own advocate. Because you're like I think I was listening to Luke earlier this afternoon doing a live stream from Grail Country, talking about how he likes to say constituted instead of wired. People are constituted a certain way, and
Right, because the
I'm
wiring sounds a lot more permanent.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it's a matter of, like most people who are high in agreeableness, if they're able to succeed and thrive, are able to stretch themselves to the point where they don't just get bullied around constantly.
right,
But it's a matter of, well, that's stretching yourself.
right,
And you don't want to place yourself in a position where all day long you're being stretched uncomfortably. You'd rather situate yourself in a place that'll accent your strengths,
hmm,
and then when you need to act from the other end of the personality scale, let's say, you have the ability to do that,
right,
but it's not the thing that you need to be doing constantly, because if you're going to do something constantly, you'd better be good at it.
right, yeah,
So I think of how many business leaders are really disagreeable,
yeah,
and they've got this ability to just like kind of push, kind of advocate for themselves,
mhm,
and not get bullied around so much. And if you're just gonna collapse, then your business is going to collapse too, because most businesses fail. Most small businesses fail. It's just really hard to make something new.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
So
anyway, it's difficult for, let's say, a highly disagreeable person to work in a situation where agreeableness is more valuable, right?
right.
So like, I don't think I'd be suited for a daycare at all.
Oh,
I've done, work with the little kids, and I can manage it, but I can manage it because I'm the guy who comes, and we're gonna go have fun, right?
yeah.
But it's like, one of them skins their knees, and I'm like, okay, I guess we'll clean the blood up. This would be a lot easier if you weren't hysterical and crying right now, though. So
Yeah,
why don't you just go? And it's just like,
yeah, yeah,
I don't kiss boo boos. That's
yeah,
maybe I'd be able to manage it with my own children if I had some. But
yeah,
yeah. So anyway, basically, you just want to have a highly principled and disagreeable estuary leader, so that if he detects somebody who's going out of bounds, he can just kick them out.
yeah, yeah. So, did you have any other thoughts, Xavier?
Um, yeah, I used to struggle with the lack of assertiveness as well.
Ah,
Um, but I was like, when I first became a believer, I joined a cult.
Hmm.
oh no,
So
so
I
sorry.
was raised to be passive in my own house. So psychologically, I was extremely agreeable. I thought that conflict of any kind, upsetting anybody at all, was by definition hurting them,
Hmm.
and therefore sinful.
Hmm.
But
Oh,
this cult had a lot of dysfunctional practices, and
mm,
they shut people down. And the only way to leave is to be disagreeable. The only way to protect yourself and the truth is to be disagreeable. So
mm,
Hmm.
the only way to be virtuous in this case was to be disagreeable and have a conflict with the leadership and or their message and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
used to think it was a Christian virtue to be agreeable, but it's not
sometimes it's a Christian
necessarily.
virtue to be agreeable.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the right move. You know, I've actually examined cognitive behavioral literature before, and specifically the assertiveness training. And like, you know, this was just like a real quick overview of it. It wasn't a deep dive, and it didn't dig into the science. It was just kind of a how does this thing work there, and it you know, part of it just seemed like, hey, here's some ideas for phrasing yourself that make you sound A, not like a pushover, and B, not like a bully, right?
Mm.
Which it was like it's pretty simple, you know, and you could practice it, you know, especially if you haven't done that more. But some of it was sort of like this you know, this book I was reading. It was like, you know, standing up for yourself isn't wrong, and sometimes it might be the right thing to do. So it was like it was like they were putting like the ancient wisdom of the virtue tradition into scientific language and framing,
Yeah.
um, which is um, which is it's just kind of funny, you know. It's like you could have just read Aristotle and figured this out,
Yeah.
or you could have just, you know, asked somebody wise and who's um, you know, had some life experience how to handle these things. But
Yeah.
I suppose with your family and a cult, you uh, might not be in a position to do that. Mitchell's got an interesting question. Says, I don't think Christians are meant to be agreeable. Something is off about that. And this actually, since we're talking about personality so much, it reminds me of what I think Jesus's big five temperament would have been like. And I think it would
Mhm.
have actually been unmeasurable
Probably.
because, and this is a Thomistic doctrine, so hopefully we're not getting too deep in here. But you know, there was this sense that his soul, which was perfectly obedient to the will of God, had complete command over his body.
Mm.
Right? So he was the perfect human being.
Mm.
So you can imagine just kind of the fierceness and the aggression that got him to clear out the temple near Passover without hurting anybody, right? When he was overturning the tables, right? John's gospel says he only used the whip on the animals. So the rest of it was just his sheer presence and force of personality was what cleaned the temple out.
Oh.
So we've got that, right? We've got, wow, man, this guy must have been extremely disagreeable, right? And then we go to the other side of the spectrum, and he's very tenderly, you know, speaking to the woman, the sinful woman who's, you know, washing his feet with her tears, is able to speak a word to her that encourages her, that lifts her up, probably a maximally compassionate response. So, I guess, Mitchell, Christians aren't meant to be agreeable. They're not meant to be disagreeable. We're meant to imitate Christ as best as we can manage. And um, that means that we try and stretch ourselves into territory that's, uh, yeah, that's a little uncomfortable for us. Like I've had to do as a priest. They, you know, I'm a little disagreeable. And like the thing that frightened me the most about ministry was dealing with people who were grieving, dealing with people who were in pain. I
Mhm.
was like, oh, gee, this is like, it's a little bit of anxiety that was dogging me the entire way through seminary. And I didn't know how I was going to handle it until I got to my last semester of ceremony when we did a pastoral ministry class. And they brought in this psychologist to teach us the basics of motivational interviewing. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No.
It's what psychologists do all the time. They figured out that if you just ask people the right questions,
Mhm.
they come up with their own solutions that might actually work.
Oh.
And then they're also in a position where they'll actually maybe put them into action, although that's not guaranteed because it's their ideas, right? So the The
What does that
fundamentals
mean
are
to you?
open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and synthesizing, right?
Huh.
And so it's really interesting when you actually start practicing, right? Like coming up with open-ended questions for people to fill in their own answers, reflecting what they're saying back to you. What you're actually doing is you're training yourself to give them a certain kind of attention.
Huh.
You're training yourself to give them attention so that you can manifest the fact that you're caring about them. Because think about, if you're going to ask an open-ended question that's going to be received well, it needs to be relevant towards the context, it needs to be moving people in a direction that they want to, at least theoretically go. If you're doing a reflection, you're showing that person that you're listening to them, right? Because you're taking the essential content of what they're saying and you're reformulating it in your own words, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing an affirmation, hopefully you're affirming good things, right? You're affirming progress. You're affirming the points where they're correct. So it's a way of manifesting. It's just kind of a framework for, you follow these rules, you do these things, you'll manifest your concern for this other person. What I found is that I would use this with somebody who's struggling with something, grieving over something, that actually brought out the compassion in me.
Oh.
Because I would just focus on them and focus a certain quality of attention on them. And then the compassionate part of me, which doesn't get out very often, was like, oh, goodness, this is where we're actually, and then I could be a good priest and, praise God for that. So, that motivational interviewing is probably one of the better things that psychologists have come up with.
Huh, that's interesting. I never heard of that before.
Yeah.
I knew that there was a listening feedback thing, but I never knew it was called motivational interviewing. I'll have to look into that. That's interesting.
It's very useful, especially for a guy like me to whom that sort of thing does not come naturally. But it's like, I just do this, and that's the right thing.
Huh.
And I can do it no matter how I feel.
Cool.
Like if I'm kind of tired about this person and I don't particularly care for them, I can still just do that. And even if I don't necessarily have the, compassionate passions following through on it, it's still the right thing to do. So it's like, So anyway, I'm glad I got that before I got out of seminary.
Yeah.
I didn't have to try and rediscover that for myself. So,
cool.
Yeah. So anyway, but you can come up with all sorts of little tricks. The disagreeable people can learn motivational interviewing, and the agreeable people can learn assertiveness training.
Yep.
And you can stretch yourself beyond your natural capabilities there.
I had a small thought to add on to your answer to the gentleman that posted the question is, we kind of live in the tension of the paradox. That kind of what the Christian faith does and religion in general does. It takes the push and pull of both dynamics, and we walk the path of the way holding those in tension with each other. So understanding when to be disagreeable and when to be agreeable. It's like Paul is one of the most disagreeable apostles, and yet he's telling people to be at peace with people as much as you possibly can. It's like, well, there's, but you gotta know when to speak the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And and you need to know when to do the motivational, interviewing. It's like understanding what's appropriate when, kind of thing.
Yeah, and the best way to know is what's good here and what are we doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, hey, we're all working together on the parish summer picnic, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, gosh, what can I do? How can I be helpful? Right? Very agreeable sort of responses.
Right.
That's like, so we're all oriented together and doing the same thing. And then, let's say somebody is beginning to behave in a tyrannical and inappropriate manner.
Right.
You might have to switch from the agreeable cooperationness and cussing at people because they're not doing things your way. It really isn't appropriate.
Right.
And it's okay if you want to send the person who's a little more disagreeable and enjoys the fight to have that conversation with that person. Right?
Yeah.
Some people have a lot more passion for setting these boundaries. And I remember Dr. Peterson talking about his friend who works as a consultant that people would hire to come in and fire people.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
This extremely impolite person, a very low in agreeableness. And it's like, he would talk to me like, oh, how could you just go in and fire people? And he's like, look, these people are useless. They don't work in their company and they're going to drive it out of business. So firing them is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's like, it's good that there's people like that in the world. I just hope you don't end up on the wrong side of them.
Yes. Yeah.
And you hope they're aligned with the good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they can work a lot of mischief there.
Yeah. I've never been really into it, but I've heard about it, and I have a book about it from a Christian perspective of the Enneagram stuff. And one of the dynamics that I remembered, I don't remember any of the numbers or what they are or anything like that. But one of the things that was very interesting to me that I took away from it, so whatever someone's strength was also their weakness. And I thought that was kind of insightful to hear, was that the dynamic of there's a Asian, maybe Chinese, old saying says, make your weakness your strength, but never let your strength become your weakness.
Mhm.
And I kind of always thought about that, and I've wrestled with that, and I thought this, speaking with all the handicaps and stuff I have and health issues, and it's like, how do I do that? I don't understand how to do that, but it's interesting.
Yeah,
I thought it was insightful.
I mean, the thing about your strengths is they're kind of dangerous because they can become a temptation to pride.
Oh yeah,
And that's the easiest way that they become your weakness,
that's true.
right? Because
Yeah.
you might get lazy, you might not put the time, energy, and attention into it that you were doing previously to get up to that level of strength. Or, I guess it's the way that, judo works, is that, a judo practitioner, when I'm throwing a punch at you, they're going to use the momentum that I'm putting into the punch to knock me off balance and put me on my back.
Right.
Whereas that's the force, that's my strength that they're using for that. So,
Right.
So that's certainly one way where that your strengths can end up becoming your worst weakness and your worst enemy because, you're just not. I just get complacent and proud. So
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other ways that can manifest though, because it just seems very true.
Yeah, it does. It has a ring of truth to it. Hi, Mark. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing all right.
Cool.
Yeah,
I
think
love that dragon thing in the background. That's so
the
cool.
Liquid Dragon. Yeah.
How did you get that?
I won it at La Kermesse probably
Very
a million
cool.
years ago.
Aw, cool.
Oh, that's not a Sally Joe. Okay.
Yeah,
Sally
that's
Joe's
a
made a
Sally
number of dragons. I just
Oh.
assumed
Nope.
incorrectly. Okay, well that explains why it's on a piece of glass too.
Yeah, it's on a mirror actually.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it's got a wood frame and everything.
Nice.
I don't know what I had to do to win that, but whatever it was, I was pretty damn good at it because I'm pretty sure that was their top prize.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome.
I won a Kindle in a raffle in high school, and that saved me a bunch of money on textbooks.
I bet it did. No, this was a game of skill, my friend. This was not a raffle.
Okay.
Yeah. I won a bunch of things like that when I was younger. Yeah.
I could have won a catechism trivia in high school. I never had to study for religion class. I was just a giant nerd, and nobody was surprised when I went to the seminary.
That would be good. That would be good. Catholic trivia. That'd be a fun game right there.
Yeah, Catholic Jeopardy.
Catholic Jeopardy, sure. I think it's a good way to go. Yeah, I think one of the mistakes people make is thinking in terms of strengths and weaknesses, because everything's a trade-off, right? And so if you want to become good at something, you're becoming bad at something else,
True.
right? And then when you become good at something, to your earlier point, Father, you get, oh, I'm really good at this. It's like, oh yeah, until you're not.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, the trade-offs that's a useful thing, right? So we could look at the size of Shaquille O'Neal, right? Just he's over 7 feet tall, I think, and over 300 pounds. And, that made him a great center for the LA Lakers. Like how do you stop that? But there's a reason that he's constantly advertising pain medication.
Oh,
Because
wow.
we have to imagine, like,
yes.
the wear and tear on that man's joints. I know he's probably got access to the best doctors in LA, but still, it's like that's just a lot of weight that you're putting on the joints, and they call it the cube square law. As your volume goes up, your mass will increase by a cube number, but the things that relate to your bodily strength and sturdiness will go up by a square, which is why there's a limit to the size of creatures that could live, and why all the biggest creatures live in the ocean.
Right.
They've got the trade-off of they're being buoyed up by the water. Their legs don't need to support all of their weight. The water will do that for them.
Yeah. Their weight support is spread out throughout their entire exterior.
Yeah. So it's trade-offs. Yeah. Whereas I think of my first pastor, Father Dale, who was under 5 feet tall, and he's in his mid-70s. He's still very bright, very chipper, can move around quickly. Maybe not quite as young as he once was, but I think those knees still got some tread on them. He doesn't have to go change those in because he's just not putting that much strain on them. So he gets that end of the trade-off. No chance in the NBA, but he's in his late 70s and he's still moving around fine.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not a bad trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it takes all types. I mean, that's why we have different people.
Yeah.
And you can't like everybody, and I don't know why you should. So
Yeah.
It's ironic. All the people that talk about hippie Jesus or whatever, they're the ones that don't like certain people. It's overtly. So might be a little hint as to their psychology there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it's hard because I think people lack discernment. Right? Discernment is hard. And that's where everybody is. And no one wants to do it, right? It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then you have to make decisions, and it just gets worse and worse and worse.
I mean, that's what makes Christ such a challenging figure to approach is if I'm correct, then he is maxed out on at least agreeableness and disagreeableness. Probably also, like, he could be extremely extroverted and outgoing, and then he could spend 40 days praying in the desert, right?
Right.
He could do both of those, right? And he probably had a great love for order, right? But he could also go around camping and be an itinerant preacher his entire life. He didn't have to have like a really well-ordered house that he was living in. And he was, be the smartest man who could have ever possibly lived, right? But he also wouldn't have been bored listening to the most simple-minded of his disciples. If he needed to talk with them and minister to them, he would not have considered that beneath himself. And when you meet people who are very intelligent, they get very frustrated with people who are far less intelligent than them.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the key. Like if you look at even something like the Big Five, as good as it is, everybody wants to get nailed down on the spectrum and then figure out how to stretch where they're at. It's a very paradoxical way of thinking about the world, right? That's why I'm not a fan of opponent processing and intention and things like that. I'm like, these are not ways to cooperate with the world. So you have to cooperate with you have to cooperate with your own self. You have to cooperate with nature, and you have to cooperate with others, right? And you have to cooperate with the past, right? And that's why things like communism devolve into destruction of the past, right? Is what could be unburdened from what has been. Like, what? No, we're not unburdened from what has been. Everything we have, we owe to the past. Everything, technically, good and bad, right? But everything, and you wouldn't have any of the good stuff. And that's something you need to be grateful for.
Yeah.
And I like Michelle's comment here, right? Which is basically the capacity issue.
Who's Chris?
Right? I think he means Christ. I think he's missing a T. Right, but he had the capacity to do whatever it was that was needed in the moment, and he had the discernment to know what that was. And though that's really important, because without that, you end up in a bad place. And it's that flattening, it's that reduction of the world to something like psychology or any of the sciences, really. That's where you run into trouble, right? Because you're not staying flexible and understanding of the variance involved in the cooperation with the things around you and the things that came before you.
I'm curious about something you said a little bit earlier, Mark. You talked about how people with the big five want to nail themselves down, and then stretch themselves out.
Yeah.
Now, the way I've been conceptualizing the big five is, first off, like those percentile figures that it gives you are guidelines. It's going to give you like basically as much, like the 10% chunks are going to give you as much detail as you need. Where do I fit in with everybody else? And it seems like develop the capacity to develop the capacity beyond what you're comfortable with actually gives you a greater capacity in the world, which is why I was talking about that motivational interviewing stuff
right
so much.
I mean, but again, I mean, the project of psychology or science in general, any of the quote sciences, and we can make a good argument, psychology cannot be a science. Not is not, but cannot be, which is a fair argument that I could easily make. But we'll just set that aside and say that the scientific project itself is the project of finding problems to solve. And so again, you're trying to nail something down into a problem, and then you're trying to solve it, right? Which is a very roundabout way to go about life, actually, which is why it wasn't ever used until, extremely recently at this point, extremely recently in human history. And so I'm always perplexed by people who, we have this because of science. It's almost never true. In fact, I haven't found a single instance yet, right? Science explains things that already happened. It doesn't actually make things happen. That it's observation first. So the thing that you don't understand happens first, and then the science figures out how it happens.
In terms of material and efficient causality.
Right, and it's limited to material and efficient causality. Right. And actually, that's not even true. It wants only one. Like
only one's sufficient, probably, right?
It doesn't matter which one, actually, technically.
Okay.
So in some cases, it goes after efficient. In some cases, it goes after material. But like in order to do good science, you have to shrink everything down to one variable. You have to control all the other variables. You have to. It's not it's not an option otherwise, right?
I learned about the scientific method in third grade, and there was only one independent variable. Right? Mrs. Woods was very serious about that.
I know. Well, it's kind of required for that proper engagement.
Yeah.
And that's what people miss. It's a very reductionist way of looking at the world. It's sort of wholesale. And when you apply that to a person, I mean, you just squishing a person down to nothing. You know, like the Big Five is great. It's probably the best personality psychological tool that we have by far. But that's actually not saying much,
Right.
right? Because it doesn't tell you anything. Like you could say, oh, so-and-so's disagreeable, right? But that doesn't mean they don't have a great love of people.
Right.
Right. And it doesn't mean that they're not good at helping people.
Right.
It
It
just kind of
means
gives them
that,
their first response to things.
well, their first response, but I mean, there's different types of disagreeability. Like some people will just disagree no matter what you say.
Right.
Like I don't do that. I agree with people all the time, and I encourage them. Right? When I agree with people, I typically back them up. I mean, I have this whole thing that's actually spread on Twitter, thank goodness, called "Can Confirm," where when somebody says something good, you know, or true, I add to that "can confirm." Why? Because, well, A, I know how to manipulate algorithms, and B, I know how to encourage people. And, you know, I wasn't doing that correctly before Peterson. And Peterson said, like, people need so little encouragement. And I went, oh, huh? What are you talking about? And then I started to do it, and I've used it in all sorts of ways since then. And it might as well be a magical power at this point. And then I came up.
You've colonized me, Mark. Like I'll say that to normal people that know nothing of Mark.
Yeah. Well, it's good. I mean, I'm glad to hear that. But like, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of people on Twitter using "can confirm" now, and I'm like, yes, excellent, because those people need to hear that. And there's one guy on Twitter, his handles, or at least his display name is Survivor. And I guess he was in prison and all this stuff. And he's always posting the motivational, positive stuff. He talks about, I was in prison, I was, you know, angry, and then I let go of my anger, that sort of stuff. And then at the end of last year, he did one of these, you know, thank you all for, you know, for paying attention to my Twitter things. And underneath that, or maybe it wasn't underneath that, I might have sent him a DM. But I basically said, like, look, man, thanks for all the stuff you're doing, because what you're doing is good work.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, and that's like super important for those people to hear that, because people don't take the time to do that, right? And you know,
it's the exact right encouragement.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
The stuff
and it's not too frequent either.
Is good work.
Yeah,
it's not. I love you so much.
Exactly.
Those are really different things, right? Or you're really good at this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and sometimes, look, I see some of his stuff, and I'm like, it's not really phrased a way that I think is great.
Oh, you went 20 minutes off on me today because I used the word empire rather loosely and carelessly, and that was like 20 minutes of the book club today. So, yeah. I know all about that.
I was gonna make the other point anyway. You just happened to step in a definite pet peeve of mine. Yeah, but like it's important not to do it too often, and it's important to point it in the right direction at the right things, and not at the person, right? Because they're just a vessel for what they're doing, right? Oh, the work you're doing is good, right? And not even it's necessarily well done, right? Because that actually doesn't matter, right? The positive affect matters more than the perfection of the pointing.
I think on Twitter that's probably true. I would like my heart surgeons to do things very well, but I'm not going to be complimenting them, you know, while I'm intubated and my chest cavity's cracked open. So
yeah, but what well enough works. That's the thing. Like, they don't have to sew your heart up perfectly or anything, right?
There's still a narrow window for well enough in heart surgery.
There are narrower windows in different areas for sure. But that's important to know, because you do have to point at the good things, and you've got all these people, you know, whining about, you know, outrage, blah blah blah, online stuff all the time, and you know, maybe I don't have access to this information, but I have a lot of access to a lot of their information. They don't post encouraging stuff online. So like, they are the problem. No, they're part of the problem. They are the problem. And it's like, well, dude, you're complaining about the thing you do. And that's very common with people, right? Like if you want to know what, if you want to know what people are doing, a lot of times you can just find out what they hate, and that's usually them, right? And this is always something people said, like, oh, if you don't like homosexuals, that's because you're a closet homosexual. And of course, that's a stupid rule that isn't even remotely true. But boy, there's a lot of people out there that are talking about stuff they don't like that they do, and that's why they don't like it. It's a self-hatred that they're spewing out because people project a lot of, like, you can solve a lot of psychology by just saying psychological projection, and then that really does explain way more of the world than most things.
Right. And well, it is like, how could it be otherwise? Right. So let's say, I mean, we'll take the televangelist who's, railing against, homosexuality or whatever. And, but they're secretly practicing it.
Yeah.
Like, I guarantee you that guy is terrified of anybody finding out.
Yeah.
Right. So that's extremely salient to them whenever any of that pops up, because it could become to be. Also, it's something that they're obsessed with, because if they hate themselves for doing it, they can't stop it. That means that it's got a hold of their attention. So they're going to see it everywhere.
Yep.
It's just going to be something that's super salient to me. So they're just going to talk about it over and over again. Especially if they don't have the opportunity to go to confession, right? For a slip up.
That's why confession is super important.
Super important.
And there's a method of absolution within the confessional process. So if you don't have that process, you're kind of in a lot of trouble, especially if the confession isn't to someone else who can give you feedback, right? Because then it's not external or external enough or something. And I did want to say, I now wish for Dawn's life. It sounds wonderful. At least one example every day. Yeah, I'm well into the double digits. I'm envious. I'm just really envious right now. At least one. That sounds pretty low.
Maybe if you spent less time on 10. Twitter, this wouldn't be so big a problem.
Twitter, Facebook, Discord, grocery stores. Unfortunately, I don't go there anymore. Yeah, a lot of people, you go here, go there. And I'm like, oh, the more I go outside, the more of this stuff I see, the more depressed I become. I'm better off as a shut-in.
Mark the monk.
Yeah.
No, not that either. Ugh.
Mark the hermit.
Hermit, yes. I can be a hermit. That's fine.
We have so much wisdom and so much great things to say and share with us. Don't be a hermit. At least stay with us online.
So did St. Anthony, and then St. Athanasius would go hang out with him and write down what he was saying.
There we go.
It's how it works, right? Like St. Anthony had to keep on moving farther and farther out in the desert to get away from all the people who wanted his wisdom.
Yeah, that's how it works.
It's just like
there's a pattern there for sure.
Well, there's definitely a pattern, right? The guy who least wants to be in charge is the one who's most sought after for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't always work out. Like when Celestine V became Pope, he was right after was he right after Innocent III? He was at 12th, 13th century era. And we later canonized him, but he wasn't effective as a pope because he was too good of a hermit. So like he was right. So this was the 2.5-year conclave when the cardinals were just endlessly bickering amongst each other about who was going to be the next pope, because the pope at that time was the most powerful person in the world. Maybe not a good idea. And he just came down from the mountains and started chewing the cardinals out because the church needed a pope, and they elected him. So, you're right. They needed to, but so he resigned 6 months afterwards because he didn't have the skill set necessary to wrangle a bunch of Italians.
Who does?
Well, another Italian who's used to such things.
I guess.
So yeah. And Dante had him in the Inferno, but the church canonized him. And guess who's infallible?
There you go. There you go.
The churches.
Can confirm. We get a question.
No, probably not.
What do you mean powerful? What are these people doing throwing around this crazy word?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to talk about power, probably not. But Innocent III was as powerful as the Pope ever got. But Europe was not nearly as unified as the impression that my uneducated sense gives me that China was. Yeah, and Emma's defending her choice of terminology. You know, she's only mimicking and mirroring me.
Mimicry. Yeah, there's a great movie. Well, there's two movies with the same name, unfortunately. It's a great movie called Hero, which is allegedly, I don't know how true this is. My friends from China have not told me. They don't know, actually, which is allegedly a legend about the first emperor and how he became first emperor. And it's it's one of my favorite movies. Actually, I own a copy of it.
What era did it come out in?
I don't know. I think it's a 90s film, if I remember correctly.
It's
quite old. Yeah. But it's interesting because in the beginning, like, all the provinces of China are just fighting all the time, right? And the rough story is there's a assassin who's trying to get close to the emperor, and basically the assassin's pissed off because the emperor either directly or indirectly murdered the village, right? Because that's, of course, right? Of course, because that happened a lot.
Yeah.
Right. But at the last minute, the assassin kind of changes their mind. Right. Because it's like, why did you do this? Which is like, why'd you kill all these people? What are you doing? Right? Why are you doing this? And the answer the emperor gives is for China. In other words, for the people, like for the body of the new country, that, to unify it. Right. And it's like, wow, this is one of these powerful, sort of mind-blowing answers. It's a beautiful film. I really like that film.
Was it a Chinese film?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't a Chinese film.
Okay.
No.
Interesting.
It was sort of a sleeper film, though, and I saw it in the theater somehow. My world is very strange, like unbelievably weird. Like some of the, like I'll turn on the TV just in time to see some, seminal event happen. Like it happens to me all the time.
Wow.
I was like, yeah, I watch no TV, except I've seen all these seminal events on TV. It's like, I don't know how this is happening, but yeah, I'll flip across something or it'd be like, oh, I want to go to the movies, and then go watch something random that I didn't even review first. And no one is surprised. No, I think actually no one. I think actually no one believes that, except certain people. But well, that's a longer discussion for another day. Maybe Arkansas 2.0. I'll go over it with you. But I think I run into a lot of situations where I'm going to go to the movies. I just want movie theater popcorn, and I'll pick a movie at random, and it'll just end up being a really good film that nobody else ever sees or whatever. And
so let me ask you a few sleeper hits. Did you see Dark City in the theaters?
No.
Okay. That's the only one that comes to mind, actually.
It's funny. I've been reviewing this stuff. Jesse and I have been talking about doing our Matrix video on my
finally
Navigating Patterns channel. Yeah, we've got a whole plan.
The 12-hour 4-part series, I'm sure.
Man, if we could get it to 12 hours, that'd be fantastic. Let's not oversell anything, sir.
You think it might go 20?
Who knows? Well, we're going to involve the audience, but he sent me a bunch of videos today. Actually, just watching them before I came on. Before your thing started. And one of the ones I didn't see that I always wanted to see, so it's a little puzzling as to why I haven't actually seen it, since I've always had the option, is The Crow.
Mm.
And The Crow is a really important film. This guy just outlined it. Now I'm like, I gotta go see it now. It's like, I gotta drop everything and see this movie. But one of the reasons why something like The Crow, it's something I should have seen, although I kind of got the zeitgeist at the time, so didn't really need to see it in some sense, is because it's Brandon Lee, which is Bruce Lee's son. And then, of course, there's a mysterious death, and that whole story is just whacked completely off the charts, crazy. And I'm a huge Bruce Lee fan. I mean, Bruce Lee is just changed culture forever. Maybe not for the best, but maybe for the best. And it in a way it's weird. I've never seen it. In another way, it's like I saw that coming. Like that was obvious at the time. Even though that movie in particular, and the claim that this guy made is that was the movie, not The Matrix. That The Matrix was more popular for various very good reasons. So now I have to go watch The Crow because I got to put it in the damn Matrix discussion that we're gonna do. So I'm like, damn it, Jesse. Now I have more work. Yeah, it'll be good. We've got an approach, but we've got to narrow it down. So we're gonna have the audience narrow it down for us, and that'll probably determine how many hours we have to do to get to the end of it.
Now, how long is the list of the famous people who died at age 27? That's really weird. I know a guy, a musician type, very creative. Life was on a bad path. I guess what age he turned his life around? 27. Wow. So I think it's just really common. Like that's a common age where if you're going to be living irresponsibly, chances are like 27 is the inflection point. Either you turn it around and you get better, or you're done.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, because it's like the body can only handle so much. Your ego's writing checks that your body can't cash.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's one of those problems that people don't understand. There's a cyclical nature to the world, and science has it all flattened out. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the problem that we have in society, where we can't decide when the age is that you can make important decisions anymore for yourself right. And that goes, all the way up and down the scale at this point, right? Nobody wants to decide when to take care of their parents or whether or not to take care of their parents, right? Nobody wants to decide when to tell kids what to do or what not to do, right? I mean, it's all flat now, and that's a huge societal problem because we don't draw those boundaries anymore.
Well, you've got Emma on board. Losing the cyclical nature of the world is a source of many problems. Yeah. It's hard to see if your default language is materialism.
Yeah, propositions in general.
It's why I did my Book of Revelation series, because that book is just built on cycle and cycle on cycle on cycle on cycle. And once you're able to see that, then you can be happy again,
Yeah, you need to know that whatever you're going through is temporary.
The world falls to pieces every 500 years.
Yeah.
Just kind of happens. It's not exactly 500 years, but here we are again. Worlds fall apart. It also falls apart every 100 years.
Yeah.
It's just like.
There's one old proverb from something, I can't remember where it came from, but it's always carried me through when I've been going through rough stuff, is this too shall pass. And there's an old story of something about a king being really, really happy because everything's going well, and then somebody going through something really bad, like a peasant or somebody, and it can be used as a reminder that joy and good things are fleeting things. And then it also can be a reminder, just as Mark said, that pain and suffering is also fleeting. So it's not going to stay forever, kind of thing. So That's kind of always encouraged me, especially when I've dealt with, one time I was dealing with dental stuff, and I'm like, this too shall pass. I'll be done with this soon.
The teeth, the teeth. It's the only part of your skeleton that we get to see.
Yeah.
It's like the whole rest of the skeleton. We put protection over top of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's Saint Ignatius of Loyola put that exact sentiment all over his rules for the discernment of spirits. So he's got kind of the basic, like, you're under the influence of the good spirit or you're under the influence of a not so good spirit, right? One of them will cause consolation, just quiet peace, joy, knowing that you're properly integrated and properly oriented. When you're under the influence of the bad spirit, that'll be dissolution, darkness, confusion. He says, in times of desolation, don't change anything big.
Right.
Which is just like, oh man, that has saved, like, that one has saved a whole bunch of vocations right there, right? Because guys get tired in the seminary, they don't want to be there, and it's just because it's like February or something, or because there's some kind of sin that they've allowed to creep in there, or it's just they've been in seminary for 6 years and they've got to keep going, and they just want to quit, and then they remember Rule 5. In time of desolation, make no change. And so they just stick it out. And then as it turns out, that mood passes, the darkness passes, whatever spiritual attack they were under, it's now been lifted. And they go on, they become a priest, and they're very happy that they did that, right?
Yeah.
Extremely common. And then St. Ignatius also says, when you're in times of consolation, you just use that to shore up for the next cycle of desolation that's coming, because it's not going to last forever, and you're grateful for it while it's here, but you know that God really does his best work when you feel like garbage.
Yeah,
because that's actually when your love for him is tested. It's easy to love God when everything's going well.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and I think that's the attraction of the East, right? The Eastern thought is almost entirely cyclical. It's very non-agentic. In the East, the hierarchy is taken for granted. You can just read something like the Tao Te Ching. It's 100% clear, right? There's 3 classes, and you're in one, and you're not getting out. Right? Yeah. And so here's what you have to do. Just kind of remember, right? That's why a lot of the Eastern spiritual thought is about that cyclicality explicitly, and it's not about anything else, right? Because they don't build anything. That's the problem, right? Because the building is handled for them by the emperor effectively, and there's upsides and downsides. There's a bunch of trade-offs there, but that's why Westerners can't understand Eastern thought, right? Because the baseline assumption for them is that things will be built, right? And therefore, what you need to worry about at the bottom is the cyclicality, so that you don't get stuck and you keep working, right? Whereas in the West, that's not the case at all, right? We have to keep building things, but we've lost that deep sense of the cyclicality, even though it's kind of right there.
It's right there. It is right there. It's right there. C.S. Lewis wrote very helpful things about prayer in the Screwtape Letters. The Screwtape Letters being framed as an advice from a more experienced demon to a junior tempter, and talking about like the kind of the photo negative of it. Like, these humans, they're obviously going to go through cycles, but the best thing you can do is to make sure that they don't know about that. Because if they don't know about it, then when they get into one of the troughs, when they're at the bottom, they're going to want to give up. And once they give up, then we can go in there and do whatever we want, right? So C.S. Lewis, he didn't make that up.
Right.
Like he didn't have to make that up. That was given to him by his tradition, but it's kind of lost there. But he was a part of an Anglican tradition that I do believe actually had a liturgical calendar.
Right.
The liturgical calendar fixes that for you. because it's like, okay, it's Advent again, the beginning of a new, liturgical calendar year.
Well, a rich one where you've got something all the time that you can refer to as changing. It's not like, oh, we've got Christmas, and then we've got a bunch of weeks, and then we've got some Easter, and then we've got that's not cyclical.
Well, you got to have the Lent and the Advent. You got to have the penitential seasons. See my live stream from the day before Thanksgiving last year about why Advent will make your Christmas better. If you're actually doing some penance. I hate penance, but I know it's good for me.
Oh.
Yeah. So, that cycle of fasting before you feast makes
the
right
feast
versus the American way of doing things, where from like October 31st to December 25th we're feasting.
Yeah.
Like, do you really think that's gonna work?
I never did that. Although part of that was me being sick and realizing that if I wanted to eat at Thanksgiving, I needed to fast 3 days before anyway.
Understood, Mark. You live in a country where people are feasting from October 31st to
That's
December
true.
25th.
I used to feast all the time. So
yeah. Put that fasting in there if you want the feasts to actually stand out.
True story, bro. True story.
Can confirm. I was setting you up for a can confirm, Mark.
Can confirm. Sorry. Yeah, I know the cyclicality of fast versus feast. It was one of the things actually that I really liked when I read Taleb, which he talked about that early on. He's like, the Orthodox really have it dialed in with all this fasting they do, because they do different kinds of fasting, right? So different foods they don't eat at different times. So they're almost constantly in a stupid fast of one kind or another. It's a crazy Orthodox.
I don't know how much fasting they do during the summer.
I don't know either. But
I think they just do like the regular Friday things.
No, they do a lot. No, they do a lot. Yeah, they have like months where they don't eat certain foods.
Yeah, that's the Great Lent, Mark.
Yeah, we
used to have that. Okay,
they have at least,
it's 40 days.
They have at least
like
4 different types of foods that they exclude by themselves throughout the year. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if there's any Orthodox, either Cradle or Orthobro, that wants to jump on and tell us all about the Orthodox fasting, I would actually be genuinely interested in, because right now the Catholics stink at fasting.
That's correct.
That's why Exodus 90, for all of its rather Protestant way of going about things, is super popular, because it's a way to fast communally and not just individually, right?
Well, that's even more important, is the communal aspect of things. We've really lost that more than anything else. Yeah. And it's the communal aspect that helps you deal with things like conflict and helps you resolve problems of cyclicality, right? Because when you're down, somebody else is up, hopefully, right? And yeah, maybe you bring them down a little bit, but they bring you up, and then you both survive. It's all good.
Yeah. So anyway, I think the only way that people experience cyclicality, if they're not going in church, is via the sports and school calendars.
Yeah. Right.
And I was talking with Sam Tiedemann, and I pointed out to him, like, what the church used to do for the calendars, the school board does now.
Right.
It's like they're the ones who dictate the rhythm of our life. And it's like, well, education's a fine thing, especially if it's being done well, but I don't know if they're high up enough to actually manage this properly.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that got taken over immediately, because governments suck, and government processes and bureaucracies that spring up suck, even if they're local. And now that's been hijacked by the teachers union. And so the teachers union in most cases sets the calendar.
Life is weird and funny.
Always weird and funny.
Yeah.
And you need somebody in charge of those things with the right mindset.
Or if they're nature people.
Ah.
You can't go straight to the source. I mean, I guess the source would be the eternal procession of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's probably technically the source of cyclicality as such. But the seasons are much closer to us.
True.
But you could live in like Ecuador, where there's probably like very hot and rainy.
Mm.
Yeah, there's dry and rainy seasons near the equator, right?
Yeah.
What
You only
season
get
are you in? The wet season or the dry season? It's like, what? Those aren't seasons. Hawaii is amazing, right? Because Hawaii, the temperature is actually the same year round.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is how much water you're likely to get. That's it. It's nuts.
Yeah, because somebody was visiting Hawaii in the summer, and I'm like, isn't it going to be hot there? And they're like, well, actually, it's just the temperature there is just temperature. How hot will it be today? Today, the temperature will be temperature.
Yeah, no, it's true. If you look at the variations, very low, and yeah, the last time I went, it had just been raining for 3 straight weeks, and then we got there and it had been dry for 3 weeks, and it was dry the whole time we were there. It was like, oh, okay, I guess someone wants us here and wants us to be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes in North Dakota we skip spring. We like go straight from winter to summer.
Yeah. It's hard to get 4 seasons. I mean, it's one of the things I do miss about New England. New England has 4 seasons. It does have the best summer you could imagine, and fall is spectacular. But yeah, I can't do it anymore. So that's the problem.
I've always wondered about the weather. The word weather. It's like it's not spelled like weather. Whether or not it'll rain or not, it's spelled differently. I bet some word historians. I know there's a word that means looking up words and knowing the history of the word.
Etymology.
Thank you. I have a friend who likes to do that, but yeah, I was like, I've always kind of been curious. I probably should look it up someday.
Yeah, it'd be good to find out. I mean, in the old days, weather just determined either what you couldn't do, right, and had to do instead, or how you did it, right, and how long it would take.
Yeah.
That's why it rained like 3.5 days this last week. I have such trouble getting out of bed when it rains.
Oh, yeah.
I think my body's like, it's raining. You can't work. Now's the time to sleep.
Aww.
Because I know that you're in German and you'll just sit and work all the time.
Yeah.
You're not forced to rest, My body doesn't get that I work in front of a desk now. And the rain doesn't affect that.
That's unfortunate. Yeah, well, and we have these stupid heating and cooling systems, so the temperature doesn't change. So we're really divorced from cyclicality, like quite a bit.
Yeah.
Well, you can only get those temperature systems only do so much for walking outside. Ask me how I know.
Yeah.
Well,
I remember back when we didn't have air conditioning in our homes, and it was really exhausting and brain deadening to actually try to function during the summer with not air conditioning. So I'm very, very thankful, especially my family has a lot of health issues, that we have air conditioning and heating. It's a good thing, but I know it doesn't make it as resilient as we probably could be.
I mean, basically, I think the best way to handle that is to just not overdo it. So, at least in my current living situation where I have control of my own thermostat, it's beautiful. I set the air conditioning to 72 in the summer and 65 in the winter.
Okay.
65, I'm kind of a hot sleeper. So I love the winter, especially now that I have my own beautiful thermostat and I don't have to share it with an old man who's going to crank the heat up.
Yeah.
Which happened in my first 2 assignments. Yeah, that's 65 at night. But you know, it gets cold, and your body's like, "Oh, it's time to sleep." You know, it's the natural response right there.
Yeah. My mom has really bad arthritis, and so 72 is cold for her.
Mm,
Yeah, she feels it right away, and so as we have all these space heaters and stuff, so we have like the Dyson circular oval things, and mom just has a heater, but my sister-in-law, she gets hot all the time, and I had to adjust it over the last 20, 30 years of my life, being used to mom needing it warmer. So this is tug of war all the time with the heat and the cold. So I understand, like older folks, they just feel that cold so much, it just goes right to their bones, with the arthritis and everything.
while that may be true, I was still hot.
Yeah, I can understand my dad was hot.
And we've got these different heating zones in the house, and I'm going to put them to work.
Mm.
That's the brilliance of I think they're heat pumps, underground heat pumps.
Oh, cool.
And with those, you can just do independent heating zones much more easily because
Yep.
Yeah,
you got to put multiple down anyway. You may as well just have them operate independently.
that's helpful.
Yeah, they're
It's
cheap
also
to operate.
really efficient.
Yeah, they're super efficient.
You get that coefficient.
Yeah.
You get 5 times the amount of thermal transfer as you do electricity that you're using.
Yep.
It's like a cheat code for physics. It's amazing.
Ah,
True. That is true. Yeah, there's a lot of videos on heat pumps and how they
And
work.
I've watched every single one of them.
Mini splits are great. Mini splits converted the South. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, when I got to visit Mark, I got to experience the because I've seen the outdoor air conditioning, but like in South Carolina, you can just have outdoor above ground heating as well with a heat pump,
Yep.
and it doesn't mind because it just doesn't get that cold there.
Right.
Maybe you put a
Perfect.
few heating strips in your house in case it gets that cold, but it won't be that cold very long. And I put my hand over the fan, and it was blowing really cool air onto my hand. It was cooler than the ambient temperature. I'm like, oh, it does work. This is so cool.
They have all the big units. They have my unit's huge. All the big units have an emergency heat thing that just uses a coil and heats everything up.
Sure, but how many days below 5 degrees Fahrenheit are you really going to have in South Carolina?
I've never needed it. Ever.
Yeah.
Once.
But you put it in the system because it's like a bimetallic strip.
Yep.
It's super cheap,
Yep.
and it gives people the peace of mind when they see that they're.
And you could need it. Like it's possible. I
Yeah.
just have never needed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the one time I needed to heat something up, it wasn't the house. The house was fine. The heat wasn't even on, but the pipes froze anyway.
Oh, gee.
But I have a little propane portable
Helpful.
thing that my aunt gave me. So I just fired that up, put it under the house for 20 minutes. And then I had my water back.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heat pumps, they're magic.
Heat pumps are magic. And they're cool. It's cool physics. It's really cool to find out how they work. And they're super cheap, and they're fantastically easy to install. And yeah, they're quite wonderful, actually.
Cool. Years ago, like a couple years ago or something, I saw a Facebook ad for these air conditioners that are like yay big. And I'm like, that's not even possible. Supposedly it's really, works very well and all this
It
kind of
can
stuff.
work well if you're in an extremely arid environment. Because all you do is you fill up the little basin it has with water. And as long as the ambient temperature of the water is cooler than the room you're in, the mist they're going to spray at you will cool you down. But it will also make the environment more humid, we perceive quite correctly as hotter.
Ah,
So
interesting.
they're called swamp coolers. They're really not that special, and that's why you can
No,
buy them for $10 on Amazon, because all they're
no,
doing is just spraying cold mist at you.
no, it wasn't a swamp cooler. It was some newfangled technology, something that was a technical air conditioner of some sort.
It
Which
was a
is like,
swamp cooler.
It
okay,
was almost certainly a
I don't
swamp
want to
cooler.
argue with you. It
No,
probably,
if it doesn't
Yeah.
have a part that's getting really hot and a part that's getting really cold and a need to have them separated,
ah,
it's not proper air conditioning,
okay,
Right.
because you can't destroy heat.
ah,
You can just move it, which is why we call them heat pumps.
ah, okay.
It's just
Yeah,
where are you
we-
pumping it from and where are you pumping it to. So yeah, I mean, so like, hey, maybe if you're in Arizona and you've got a little shed, that could be an efficient cooling solution for you for nice and cheap.
Mm.
But like, yeah, most of them are long term. They're going to make things worse,
Ah, okay.
even if they do bring a little short term relief. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been looking at cooling technologies. So I think I've got something I could run off solar that would actually work, but
Mm.
I haven't done the actual work yet to put it in place. But I've got because I got my pole shed now. I'm like, how do I cool down everything outside, like the computer in particular, right? Because it's
Ah,
always 90 degrees out in the summer here at least. So,
ah,
you
yeah.
know, shade is good and shade is required, but it's not
Yeah.
sufficient to do the job. So I need something a little bit more. So I've been looking into that, and I think with an ice maker, I can pull it off. But I haven't tried it yet. Because I could run all that on solar, I think. So that would be the cool thing. Because I get I'm just being silly at this point. I could run electrical in 4 seconds out there. But I'm like, can I get away with running all solar, everything I want under the pole shed on solar? That would be fun, except the grill. The grill runs on propane, so you don't need it there. So, but yeah. Now that I have a floor for it, it's an interesting and fun experiment.
I mean, you're at a latitude where solar actually makes a fair amount of sense.
Mm.
Well, until you do the math, and then you realize power here is so ridiculously cheap, it doesn't actually make any sense.
That's right, because you have nuclear power plants down there.
Nuclear, everything down here is nuclear and water. It's all dams and it's all hydro.
No, because you got the high plains and then the low plains, and you just put a dam in between, right?
It just turns out that there's a garbage load of water on the East Coast. Just on this side of the Appalachian Mountains, there's just water everywhere flowing from the mountains down. So I'm between the mountains and the ocean, right? I'm 2 hours. You need to take 2 hours to the mountains, 2 hours to the ocean. I'm right in the middle. And then so what they've done is, I heard this. I don't know if this is true, but this is what I heard. There are no natural lakes in South Carolina. There's big lakes all over South Carolina. So they're all man-made, apparently.
Oh.
And they're huge. They tend to be
Army Corps of Engineers and all that, huh?
Dominion Energy and whoever came before them, maybe. Yeah. The mills, because they had mills. They moved the mills from, which I didn't know until I moved down here. They moved the mills out of Lowell down and New Bedford down to South Carolina and the other states. And some of the mills were still water powered. Although the first electric motor powered mill is in Columbia, South Carolina. And it's now the museum. And it's next to the
really
river.
Cool museum.
It is.
It was above standard, I would say, for like a public museum based on a single state.
That and the zoo.
Really good in Columbia. Can recommend Columbia for travel.
The zoo is freaking unbelievable. It's a way better zoo than it has any right to be. Yeah, the museum is great, and it's very puzzling to me. And then we have one of the most beautiful state houses in the country, and I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's a great place to come down.
Well, your state is old enough where, like back in those days, if you were going to build a government building, it's going to be quality. You know, we've got a little bit of that here in North Dakota. We caught the tail end of it. I've seen some very nice county courthouses here. But yeah, it's like the newer it is, the more likely it is just going to be brutalist monstrosity. And if we had Andrew here, he would come and tell us why brutalism is a thing.
What happened to Andrew? Where is he? How we're doing this without him?
My heart tells me that he's touching grass.
That would be great.
That's what my heart tells me. I have no idea if my heart's accurate, but I just really want him to be touching grass. I know for a fact that's what Ted's doing. So.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, that's good. Although I miss Ted dearly. So
yeah.
My only aspiration when I grow up is to be friends with Ted.
Yeah. Yeah. Good old Ted.
Definitely need Ted back. We gotta do Convivium too.
Yeah, nobody's ever organized one of these conventions twice.
I tried. Somebody torpedoed Thunder Bay 2 on me. So.
Don't.
Yeah. I tried. We'll get Thunder Bay 2. It'll just.
Yeah.
2 dates shot down. I'm like, really? 2? Both of them? Really? Really? That's a little suspicious.
Yeah, if you want to get something done, you got to give it to a busy person.
I have
you got to give it to a disagreeable person who really doesn't care what other people.
Yeah.
Well, my advice is that's nice. Keep it to yourself. I don't care about your damn advice. You do what I want.
Yeah. There's I guess there's a northwest estuary thing happening.
Northwest estuary.
Yeah.
Like that.
I can't pronounce it properly, but that's, I guess, in the second week of September in Washington.
Yeah, I'm busy that weekend.
Yeah.
We're putting on a big old conference right here in Jamestown, North Dakota.
Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to have, it's a Catholic thing. It's a Catholic
Nice.
thing. So, we're, we talked about this in a previous live stream. We're asking the Lord for a Eucharistic revival. I think that's the only way to put it, because you can't actually make a revival happen. But you can ask, and it doesn't hurt to ask, because the worst answer you'll get is no.
Right.
But you've got a good chance of getting a yes. And so this is, we had that big thing down in Indianapolis in July, 60,000 Catholics in downtown Indianapolis.
Wow.
Yeah. And so now we're having our own little, it'll be like 1,000 people, but we're getting Scott Hahn out to North Dakota. And I know that a lot of you, that's not going to register, but he has written all of the books, and they're good books. And I recommend them to people because he sits there and he reads the Bible with faith rather than skepticism. And lo and behold, it works.
Cooperating with the book, huh?
Yeah, it's
Crazy
just
stuff.
brilliant. And so he's a biblical scholar. He teaches at Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio, which I know you're thinking, what good can come from Steubenville? And more than you expect. And we somehow managed to snag him for a weekend. If you were to talk to regular everyday Catholics and ask them if they've ever read a Catholic book, it'll probably either be Scott Hahn or Matthew Kelly. Those are the two that they're most likely to have actually read. So, but he is actually really sharp. He's just a great popularizer. He wrote a really good book, though, on the secularization of Scripture.
Oh, interesting.
1300 to 1700.
Oh.
Digging way back in there. And oh man, it was a real slog to get through, because I read the academic version of it. I think he published a popular version of it later. And those academic books just repeat themselves constantly. It's a real, it seems like they repeat themselves. I'm sure they're responding to one guy who wrote one article And it's like, okay, well, he wrote that article and some people read it, so we got to respond to it now. But it was like, yeah, the secularization of scripture happened when people started citing scripture to solve their political differences.
Oh,
You have the
interesting.
mixing of the levels there, right?
Yeah.
And you'd think, oh boy, this is really going to elevate our politics. Nah, it's going to flatten your religion, kid.
Yeah. Render unto Caesar. Duh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't just render under Caesar, could you?
Yeah.
Do you want to flatten your religion? Because that's how you flatten your religion.
Yeah. So by the time you get to Machiavelli, he's treating Moses alongside of like all of the Roman statesmen.
Wow.
I got nothing against the Roman statesmen, but they didn't talk to God face to face.
Yep.
Not so far as we can tell.
I don't think so. None of them claimed that.
Yeah. True story, bro.
Yeah. So that one was like, he writes all these popular meditations, like a meditation on the Christmas story. Some of that stuff seems a little fluffy, and then he goes and he writes a book like that where he's really just like, hey, this thing that's affected literally every aspect of your life. Well, it actually came from about 1308. So hang on, everybody.
Wow.
From some author you've never heard of. That was
Right.
influential on a bunch of people.
That happens a lot, like
Yeah.
with feminism.
Yeah.
See, the patriarchy is good on navigating patterns with Father Eric and Adam. So yeah, it's a good video. Yeah, someone you've never heard of started feminism, and yeah, it all went downhill from there.
Yeah.
So it's always the way, right? It's always the way.
Well, the guy who invented the term theism, do you remember his name?
Cudworth.
Cudworth. Yeah. Like, who's ever talked about Cudworth? Who is this guy?
That's the thing. Like, it's not just theism. Cudworth invented almost all of the philosophical words that we use now. Almost all of them.
So he had to have influenced Hobbes and Locke then?
Consciousness. He invented all kinds of terms that no one knows anything about because he didn't write any books. But he influenced a bunch of people.
Wow.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy.
So Shakespeare invented all the good words, and Cudworth invented all of the words.
All the bad words.
Yeah.
They're all bad words. Yeah. It's horrible.
I hear people talk about classical theism, and I don't know what they're talking about.
They don't either.
That's an invented term. That and panentheism. I'm like, okay, I can put those words together. You're mixing Greek and Latin roots, so watch out for that.
Yeah, panentheism and pantheism are actually just the same thing. And
sure, but I've heard some people talking about panentheism, and I'm like, okay, if I understand this term properly, all you're talking about is what Thomas Aquinas taught. So why can't we just call it Thomism and not have these stupid made-up words?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just the whole thing is crazy. But they want made-up words because they want the thing with the good parts, but none of the bad parts according to their judgment, and then they invent new words, right? It's like, well, I want Aristotelian physics, but I don't want it to lead where it leads. So I'll just invent metaphysics, which is not a thing. And certainly Aristotle didn't recognize such a thing. And go move forward from there. And because it's the thing outside of the physics. And it's like, you mean it's the supernatural? The spirit. Is that what it is? Because that's what's outside of the physics, according to Aristotle. It's the forms. Okay. But they don't like that answer. So they've got to invent metaphysics. It's like, oh, please stop. Please stop. Yeah. There's a lot of that going on. There's a lot more than we really understand. Because I think it gets hijacked by people's egos. And they're always trying to make something for themselves. And it's like, you ain't making nothing new under the sun. I hate to break it to you. It's not going to happen. We've got thousands of years of history that somebody already thought it up and tried it, and it failed.
Or it worked. And you should just do what they did and then call it what they called it.
Well, you have to realize they tried it and failed, and that the things that work are the things that we have.
Yeah.
And then you could go, oh, okay, that's why we should do what we have, because that's the stuff that didn't fail.
Hierarchy and subsidiarity.
Liturgy to get back in cyclicality. Symbolism. Yeah. Saints. You're going to end up with saints anyway. You might as well get good ones. Yeah.
America doesn't have any saints. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., Teddy Roosevelt.
Right. You're going to get saints anyway.
Yeah.
It's all non-optional.
Yeah.
Well, we went to the Saint Shrine there, Father. Remember, that was great.
St. John Paul II Shrine.
No, we went to the Lincoln Shrine.
Oh, Lincoln. Yeah, no, they literally called it a temple.
Yeah, I know.
Really? Wow.
Oh, yeah. No. Let's. You know what? I just because it should be unbelievable, but it's not.
Yeah.
I believe you. I just surprised by that. I'm like, whoa.
And I have pictures of us there, so we were there.
Yeah, but you never posted on Facebook, even though you said you would. That's where I organize all of my photos is on Facebook.
I didn't post them.
If it doesn't get on Facebook, it'll be lost forever.
I can fix that right now. I thought I did post it on Facebook. Maybe I didn't make a Facebook post.
Alrighty. You ready? You ready, Valerie?
I'm ready.
I'm gonna blow your mind.
Okay. Wow.
In this temple, as in the hearts of the people, for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever.
Wow.
Like, I wonder what Hindus think of this.
Yes.
Like they dang well know what a temple looks like.
Yeah.
And they know what a statue of a god looks like. And
Wow.
that's what they did. And like, you know, it was Protestants who made this. So you tell me.
Okay.
If a Catholic was going to make this, there would be a crucifix in the middle and then Abraham Lincoln off to the side.
Probably.
There you
If
go.
he was a Catholic saint, there would be, you know, like I've got this image of Our Lady behind me here, and you know, she's holding on to Christ, right? And he's in the middle, and she's holding on to him, right? I got another one right there. It's the same thing, you know. Go to Saint Anna Joachim Catholic Church. You got like the big crucifix right in the middle, and you got like Saint Anna Joachim off to the side. You know, it's just that's the pattern right there. This person was close to the thing at the center.
Yeah.
It's good symbolism right there. It's good rule of thumb for good symbolism. So you don't get confused.
You just put the right things in the center, and you won't get confused.
Yeah.
So
No, that's good. Yeah, I fixed the Facebook problem, Father. So all cured. Yeah, I thought I did that. I guess I probably got overwhelmed when I got back. It was a rough end of this.
I mean, out of all the things, it's fine, you know.
I want to remember everything, damn it. I want to do all the things.
You want to have all of the information and all of the knowledge, right?
No, I just want to do all the things that I know I should be doing. Yeah, that's all. That's all I want. I don't want all the knowledge. Well, I have too much knowledge already. I keep barfing it up.
Ugh. Oh, is that what's happening here? That explains why everybody's disgusted by it.
Exactly.
All right.
It's like a cat hairball knowledge.
Yeah. Well, I think we've had a good discussion here.
Yeah.
And unless somebody's got something they really want to talk about in these next 7 minutes, it's dark outside, and rational people go to bed under such circumstances. So
thank you, Father.
Good night, and God bless you all.
Good night. God bless.